Welcome to Ink to Gold, a Pages of Possibilities podcast. I'm discussing Steve Black's article, How Journaling Shapes Your Entrepreneurial Mindset. So, picture two entrepreneurs. They operate in the exact same market at, roughly the same time.
Right.
They have identical starting capital, highly similar products, and the exact same target demographic. And today, they both hit the exact same devastating roadblock.
Which is pretty common, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's say a major supplier suddenly goes bankrupt. One entrepreneur looks at the fallout, decides the market is irreparably broken, and just closes up shop.
Yeah, they just fold.
Exactly. But the other one treats the exact same disaster as well as neutral data. They pivot their supply chain, and they actually go on to scale to 7 figures. So why?
I mean, that is the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? And usually the default assumption is that the second entrepreneur is just, I don't know, naturally grittier.
Or like a born visionary or something.
Oh, right, exactly. We tend to treat the entrepreneurial mindset like it's a genetic lottery. Like you either have that unshakable resilience baked into your DNA, or you just don't.
Which is an incredibly passive way to look at business development.
Totally.
Because it essentially means if you panic during a crisis, you're just inherently unfit for the job. But Steve's observation in this article, drawn from over 40 years of watching people build companies from the ground up, it completely shatters that idea.
Yeah, it really does. He argues that mindset is not a personality trait at all. It's simply a collection of changeable beliefs and mental habits.
Just habits.
Yeah, it is the highly specific way you have trained your brain to interpret uncertainty. So when that supplier goes bankrupt, your brain has a reflex.
It's like a muscle memory.
Right. Does it reflexively interpret the event as a fatal limitation, or does it interpret it as a complex puzzle that requires solving?
And the most important word there is trained. Because if it's a habit, it means you can actively rewire it.
You can change it, yeah.
Right. And this deep dive isn't going to be about, hyping you up or telling you to just think positive. We are looking at the exact operational tools, specifically the instructional journaling practices that Steve uses to actually force that rewiring.
We're talking about what to do when the business hits the fan.
Exactly.
But to do that effectively, we have to start by dismantling a very common illusion among business owners. Most entrepreneurs believe that because they are constantly thinking about their business, they are actively working on their business.
Oh, man, yeah.
They'll spend 12 hours a day strategizing in their head, running through scenarios, anticipating problems, and they genuinely consider that productive work.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because thinking does feel like working.
It does.
I mean, you're stressed, your heart rate is elevated, you're totally mentally exhausted by 5 o'clock. It feels like you've been in the trenches all day.
It feels like work. But neurologically, it's often just looping. Yeah, when thoughts remain purely internal, especially anxious or complex thoughts, they don't progress linearly. They just circle the same baseline assumptions and the same unexamined worries, just over and over again.
Wow, okay.
So you aren't actually solving the supply chain issue, right? You're just repeatedly visualizing the financial consequences of the supply chain issue.
It's the difference between motion and progress. Thinking in your head is like running on a hamster wheel. You are sweating, you are putting in maximum effort, but you are staying in the exact same place.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Thanks. But writing it down, on the other hand, is like drawing a map. You establish a starting point and you start charting a path forward. So practically speaking, what does this translation from wheel to map actually look like for a solopreneur who is just staring at a blank page?
Well, it looks like forced externalization. This is particularly crucial for business owners because of the inherent isolation of the role.
Right, you're on your own.
Exactly. In a traditional corporate hierarchy, your thinking is constantly externalized by default.
Yeah.
You have to write a memo to your manager justifying a budget request, or you have to pitch an idea to a room full of colleagues.
And they will immediately poke holes in your logic.
Oh, immediately. Your assumptions are constantly stress tested by other people.
But when you are the founder, you are often isolated with your own logic. There's no one to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, that assumption you're making about customer acquisition costs doesn't actually add up.
Precisely. You are operating in an echo chamber. When you force yourself to physically write the problem down, you pull those looping thoughts out of the amygdala, which is the emotion center of the brain, and force them through the prefrontal cortex, which governs logic and executive function.
So you're literally forcing a biological shift.
Yes, you literally have to translate abstract dread into a linear sentence. And something fascinating happens when you see a terrifying business crisis written in black ink on a piece of paper.
The monster shrinks.
It really does. What felt like this massive, intangible, company-ending catastrophe suddenly just looks like a series of distinct, manageable logistical issues.
It becomes objective data. You can look at the sentence and ask, like, is this actually true? Do I have evidence for this fear?
Writing slows down the cognitive process just enough to let you catch your own logical fallacies.
Which transitions perfectly into how we handle actual failure. Because mapping out a theoretical problem is one thing, but part of building a business is dealing with things genuinely falling apart.
Yeah, it's the baseline reality of entrepreneurship. And pretty much everyone listening to this knows the intellectual difference between a fixed mindset and a growth orientation.
Sure, we all know the theory.
Right. We all know we're supposed to view failures as learning opportunities and believe our abilities can be developed through effort.
Right. Nobody starts a business actively wanting a fixed mindset. No one says, I hope I give up at the first sign of friction.
Exactly.
But I have to push back on the practical reality of this. Because intellectually knowing about a growth mindset is completely useless when a $50,000 product launch you spent 6 months building completely tanks.
Yeah.
Or when your anchor client, the one paying your mortgage, suddenly churns. The immediate visceral instinct is panic. Your stomach drops.
It's physical.
It is.
I'd be
You do
wrong.
not want to calmly sit down, pull out a leather-bound journal, and reflect. You want to fire someone or you want to quit? How do you override that very real biological panic response?
What's fascinating here is that Steve doesn't ask you to suppress or override the panic at all.
Really?
Really, resilient entrepreneurs aren't robots. They feel the exact same rush of cortisol, the same disappointment, and the same fear as anyone else.
So what's the difference then?
The differentiator isn't the absence of negative emotion. It's the operational framework they use to process it quickly so they can return to effective action.
Ah, okay.
And the specific tool Steve uses for this is the postmortem. Crucially, a postmortem, not an autopsy.
Oh, I really like that distinction. An autopsy versus a postmortem. Let's break down the difference in a business context.
Okay, so an autopsy is a final verdict. It's an examination of something that is undeniably dead, solely to confirm the cause of death.
Right.
When an entrepreneur does a mental autopsy, the conclusion is always a permanent label. Like, the launch failed because the market hates my product. Or, the client left because I'm a terrible negotiator.
An autopsy leaves you with nothing to do but accept the verdict and feel terrible.
It's pure fixed mindset in action. The failure is a reflection of your inherent worth or ability.
Yes.
A postmortem, however, is an active investigation into a discrete event. It completely separates the outcome from your identity.
It treats the failure as a mechanical breakdown, not a personal indictment.
Exactly. And Steve provides a very specific 4-question sequence to force your brain into this investigative state.
So, when the panic is peaking, what are you physically writing down?
You open the journal and answer these 4 questions without judgment. 1. What happened? Just the sterile facts. The launch generated $5,000 instead of $50,000.
Just the numbers. Okay.
2. Why do I think it happened? Our open rates on the promo emails were half the industry average.
Right, looking at the mechanics.
3. What would I do differently next time? I would A/B test the subject lines 2 weeks before the card opens.
Yeah.
And 4, what am I taking forward? I am taking forward a new standard operating procedure for email marketing.
Wow. Look at what that sequence just did. It took a deeply emotional, financially terrifying event and systematically distilled it into a highly valuable standard operating procedure.
Yeah, you literally just manufactured return on investment out of a failure.
You converted raw panic into usable data.
You did. And Steve recommends anchoring this with a weekly habit to keep that growth orientation firing.
What's a habit?
Every single week, write down what new skill you are currently developing, especially if you are actively terrible at it right now.
I love that. Embracing the terrible phase.
Documenting your messy progression in a new software or, a clumsy new sales technique forces your brain to value the trajectory of learning rather than just obsessing over immediate performance metrics.
That shifts the focus from proving yourself to improving yourself.
Exactly.
But processing a failure is really just looking backward. If that journal is going to actually generate revenue, we have to use it to look forward, especially when you hit a wall and the obvious solutions just aren't working.
Right.
So how do you write your way into innovation?
Well, this is where the journal stops being a therapeutic tool and becomes a strategic weapon. In any saturated market, Survival depends on seeing angles that your competitors are missing.
Which is hard to do.
Very hard.
Yeah.
But again, we tend to romanticize creativity. We treat it like a lightning bolt that hits you in the shower.
Right, pure inspiration.
Stiv argues that business innovation is a highly practiced mechanical process. It's a muscle you have to build.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Steve has a brutally effective method for exercising that muscle when you are completely stuck. Let's say your customer acquisition costs have suddenly doubled and your profit margins are vanishing.
A total nightmare scenario.
Yeah. The method is to sit down and force yourself to write exactly 10 solutions to that single problem. And I look at this strictly like weightlifting.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. How does the set play out?
Well, think about doing a set of heavy bicep curls. Reps 1, 2, and 3. They are effortless. They are just the warm-up. In problem solving, your first 3 solutions are the obvious ones.
Like what?
Like solution 1, raise prices. Solution 2, cut the marketing budget. Solution 3, fire a contractor. It's exactly what your competitors are doing. It's your default setting, and it requires zero creative effort.
And if you stop there, which most people do, you end up with mediocre derivative business strategy.
Exactly. Even reps 4 through 7 are usually just slight variations of the first 3. But by the time you hit rep 8, 9, and 10, that is where the muscle actually tears and rebuilds.
You are completely out of familiar territory.
You are. The obvious answers are exhausted, and you are staring at a blank page, forcing your brain to reach into the absurd.
And the absurdity is the point. The journal is the one place where completely impractical, unbudgeted, wild ideas are entirely welcome.
Because there's no stakes on the page.
Right. Steve notes from decades of observation that those last few uncomfortable, agonizing rep solutions, 8, 9, and 10, are almost always where the viable breakthrough ideas live.
Because you can't rely on the status quo anymore. By solution 9, you aren't just adjusting the ad budget. You are suddenly mapping out a joint venture with a non-competitor who shares your exact demographic to completely bypass traditional ad spend.
Yes.
You wouldn't have found that idea if you hadn't forced yourself past the obvious first answers.
You have to deliberately exhaust the ordinary to access the extraordinary. The brain is lazy, right? It wants to conserve energy by giving you the most accessible answer.
So true.
The 10 solutions rule removes the option of taking the easy way out.
Which is an incredibly empowering internal process. But businesses don't exist in a vacuum. A huge portion of an entrepreneur's stress comes from external threats. Like a massive competitor enters your niche, or a rival company launches a feature that perfectly mimics your core product.
This is the ultimate test of the mindset framework. This is the battle between operating from scarcity versus operating from abundance.
And everyone in the business world knows these terms.
Oh yeah. Scarcity is the belief that the market is a zero-sum game. If someone else gets a client, that's a client stolen from you.
Right.
Abundance is the belief that markets can expand and mutual success is possible.
Again, knowing the definitions is easy. But when you are scrolling social media and you see a direct competitor celebrating a massive funding round, the physiological reaction is pure scarcity.
Your chest tightens.
You immediately feel like you are falling behind. You start obsessing over their strategy, you get incredibly protective of your own ideas, and your decision-making becomes driven entirely by the fear of losing your slice of the pie.
Scarcity creates tunnel vision. It constricts your strategic options because you're playing defense instead of offense.
So how do you use ink and paper to break that biological fear response?
You attack the scarcity directly on the page. You interrogate it. When you feel that tightness in your chest, you write down, what am I actually afraid of right now?
You force the vague fear into the light.
Exactly. Drill down into the specifics. I am afraid their new marketing budget will make my product invisible.
Okay, and then what?
Once it is written, you challenge the premise. You ask, is there a way to see this situation differently? Could this competitor's massive funding round actually be proof to investors that our specific niche is exploding?
Oh, that's a huge reframe.
Or does their heavy marketing spend actually educate the broader market, lowering my ultimate customer acquisition costs?
You are actively hunting for the hidden advantage in the threat.
And the simple act of putting the scarcity thought under the microscope strips it of its power. It stops being an undeniable reality and just becomes a hypothesis, one that you can consciously choose to reject.
Wow.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we see the ultimate compounding return on investment of this entire practice.
Well, okay, tell me more about that.
Well, if you were doing these postmortems, forcing the 10 solutions, and interrogating your scarcity fears day after day.
You start generating an incredible amount of raw data about your own operational behavior.
Exactly. Which brings us to pattern recognition. But this isn't a quick fix. This is the payout that only reveals itself after 6 to 12 months of consistent documentation.
So, what does this all mean for you a year from now?
It is the closest thing you will ever get to having an objective instruction manual for your own success.
Really, an instruction manual.
Yes. When you are inside the day-to-day grind of your business, your behavioral loops are totally invisible to you. You are too close to the canvas to see the painting.
But when you sit down on a Sunday, a year into this practice, and read through your own historical entries, the invisible triggers suddenly light up like neon signs.
They really do.
You realize, wow, every single time I have a minor cash flow dip in Q3, my documented response is to panic and sign a heavily discounted multi-year deal that I end up regretting.
You see the operational traps before you step in them again. You also discover the hidden architecture of your biggest wins.
Like what?
Well, you might read back and realize, hey, the 3 most profitable campaigns I ran this year all happened during weeks where I blocked out Tuesday and Wednesday entirely for deep work and took 0 meetings.
You spot the red flags you usually ignore too. Like you read entries from 3 different nightmare clients and you notice that every single one of them pushed back on your initial proposal deadline.
Yes, the pattern proves that the boundary pushing was the leading indicator of a bad client.
And you can now build a filter to never hire that type of client again. You are using your own historical data to optimize your future operations.
That is the ultimate definition of an entrepreneurial mindset. It isn't a magical aura. It is the systematic, practiced ability to observe your own thinking, interrupt the unhelpful patterns, and consciously choose a more effective response.
It's turning your own history into the most ruthless, accurate business advisor you could ever hire. And to kickstart that exact process for you today, we want to leave you with a provocative thought.
A final question from Steve's practice that we want you to genuinely mull over.
Don't just think about it in your head. Grab a pen, open a notebook, and write down your answer to this. What belief about your business or yourself keeps showing up when things get difficult?
Because the answer you write down might be the exact bottleneck holding your business back.
That's the practice. Try it this week and see what happens. Subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop, and visit pagespossibilities.com for more journaling practices designed for entrepreneurs. Link to the full article is in the description.